happy today to have another webinar with you, and this time with a very special guest. She is a lady that was present at my previous webinar in September, I guess. Ioana Staicu. She is a B Corp leader and operations assistant at Appointed, all the way from Scotland, from Edinburgh. Appointed has became a B Corp certified company last year in the field of innovation, online booking, and technology, I could say, for a lot of well-known customers. And I was very impressed to see the case studies that they put on the website, how their very innovative booking system have helped customers have more revenues and have more bookings. And it's really amazing how this can increase sales and client traction. Today the topic is a very challenging one for me, especially as a B leader, because I have to work and guide companies through the B Corp certification process. And one big step of this process is to complete the B Impact Assessment. In the B Impact Assessment, we answer to more than 200 questions. And not only answer to these questions, but we also have to find the proof of impact. So actually what we say we do, we need to prove that we do. And for this, we need rigorous data and good data that demonstrates our impact. So because that is something that I confess is a challenge for me, but also for my clients, I have asked Ioana today to come and tell us how was for her as already completing this certification process, and how did she manage to collect the data, how did she manage to master it and to communicate it in a way that it really represented a proof accepted by B Lab, which is the organization that gives a certification. So today we will talk a lot about, what is the certification process, what kind of data you need for this certification, and also how you should maybe manage it, keep it in a place where you can retrieve it and help your team go back and find it in the correct way. So maybe that's all from me. I would like to let now Ioana take the floor and share us some learnings from her experience about data management at Appointed. Thank you for joining, Ioana. Thank you for accepting to be our guest speaker, and I'm looking forward to hear from
Thank you so much, Corina, for the invitation. I have a little slide deck that I could share. If you just give me one moment. I just have to move things around. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Awesome. So I already put the front page and everything, just so we would be reminded of that. So just to tell you a little bit more about me, thank you so much, Corina, for the introduction. So I am the B Corp lead and operations assistant at Appointed. So a bit about what I do on a day-to-day basis, everything from office and general administration, obviously business operations, a bit of information security, HR support and communications. I'm the person who started the sustainability efforts as well, and I'm wearing as well many other hats. And I've been given this wonderful opportunity to coordinate the B Corp application process for Appointed, which we have managed to complete within 10 months. So this is one of our biggest achievements, and I can't wait to tell you more about it. So just to give you a bit of an idea about what our company does, as Corina mentioned, we are an award-winning online booking solution. So our technology is trusted by the world's biggest brands, and we aim to increase efficiency, drive revenue, and just make the best possible customer journey through omni-channel booking experiences. So if you think about booking yourself in to get a haircut somewhere, if you see a widget pop up with a calendar, service, and a resource, chances are you might see us, and you might, if you see Powered by Appointed, it's our solution. To give you an idea of the brands that we work with, we're proud to be working with Marks and Spencer's, Lego, Victoria's Secret, Clark's, some big names that we're really, really proud to power and to collaborate with. And as I said, we are a certified B Corp as of April this year. So today I would like to share with you a bit of our about our journey, basically, and how we started from not really knowing where to start to actually completing it. So to be completely honest with you, when I was given this project, I was like, right, I don't know what this means yet. I just knew of some brands, for example, some snacks that have that B on the wrapper. And I was like, oh, I've heard of that. I heard it's a very rigorous process to go through and quite scary. But what motivated us to go through with it was the fact that we already had really good initiatives in place in terms of work culture. Sorry about the ambulance. In terms of work culture, in terms of customer satisfaction, in terms of our processes and efficiency, etc. But we also acknowledged that we had some things to improve on. So we saw it as, in the initial phase, as a tool to establish where we are and see where we can, you know, whether we can level up and actually go through with the B Corp process. And since Halloween is coming up, I thought, you know, the analogy with the big and scary B Corp process was appropriate. So where do we start? So at first, research. We saw it as a big project, so I kind of approached it as a big project, and I say I because I was given the job of managing it all. So understanding the scope, the criteria, and the resources needed, just like for any other project, was really important. Then, of course, the planning stage, the communication channels, figuring out what people from what teams would be necessary, because it's quite a disruptive process and you don't need to engage everyone. Of course, depending on the size, there's only 29 of us, so maybe it would have been possible, but it wasn't necessary. So identifying who was needed in the process, and of course, setting internal deadlines to be able to be pacey with it, and yeah, make the deadlines set by the evaluation analyst, etc. All of this stuff we're going to go in detail in a few minutes. Delegation and administration, so breaking things down to make them more manageable. All hands on deck. So from that pool of people selected, figuring out how and we're going to tackle it all, and getting all together and doing it all when needed. Patience and resilience as well, because there's a lot of bureaucracy involved in terms of making sure that you have all the records necessary. And of course, good data protection infrastructure, which is the main theme of the webinar today, and which we feel really strongly about. Like any company dealing with customer data, we are a service-based company, but any company selling something will know the importance of protecting your data, no matter who you're dealing with, no matter the stakeholder, the type of customer. So let's delve right in with the B Corp timeline and the BIA process. I've assumed that I wasn't sure who would know about the process and who wouldn't, so I thought it would be a good overview just to go through everything, and just in terms of my thought process again when I approached it. So firstly, we did some background research, and what I found really useful was this introductory course on the B Lab website called Behind the B, an Introduction to the B Corp Movement. And I think if someone in the company decides or comes up with the idea of, maybe we should apply to become a B Corp, it's a really good introduction to the whole process behind the movement, the whole reasoning, the purpose of doing business for good, or just better business, as the name suggests, B Corp or benefit corporation. But it also outlines the whole process, the timelines, what is necessary. It fleshes it out in bite-sized bits of information. So I thought it was great to get me started into this process. And of course, I took lots of notes. And yes, it also outlines what kind of data will be required. So you can make an internal decision with the executive team. Can we do this? Do we have the time, resources, the human resources and the material resources to go through with this? Because whilst the initial part, the B impact assessment is free of charge, and again, can be used as a tool just to measure your baseline performance and if not efficiency of operations, but you understand how good they are compared to maybe other companies of your industry and size. Yeah. So apologies, I forgot how I started that sentence. It was a really long sentence. But the tool is free, but yes, the application is quite expensive. So this helps you get all the information you need to make the case to, for example, the executive team and be like, do you think we could do this? So we took lots of notes. I use Notion, which is quite useful, but you can also use Google Drive. And Google Drive will be our best friend in this webinar. I love Google Drive, and I think in terms of data protection and safety, it's a really good suite to use. But no problem if you use something else. This is just what we used and what we found useful. I will also speak throughout the webinar about levels of access. So I think a really important part about data protection is knowing who should have access and who shouldn't have access to certain kinds of information, which I think is something that all companies should know. But in terms of the data that is collected for B Corp, which we're going to explore again in more detail, I think it's really important. And the research is good for everyone in the company to know, why do we need to do this? Why do we want to do this? And why do we think we could do this? So in terms of the steps to become a certified B Corp, this is from the B Lab website. Again, it starts with a bit of a reflective exercise of revisiting the mission, vision, and purpose of the business, seeing what kind of impact the company creates in the world. Is it related in any way, shape, or form to an environmental or social cause? Does it support any kind of marginalized groups? Or what is it that is at the foundation of the company? And that is important for the B impact assessment, where there's a section in the governance section, a subsection in the governance section, where you're asked about the company's mission. So it all ties in very nicely. So then the B impact assessment is completed, and then you get a score, which could be anything, but in order to qualify to go through with the whole B Corp process, you need to have over 80 points, or let's say around 83 to 85, just to be safe, because sometimes points get deducted after an expert looks at your application and might say, well, actually, you don't meet this criteria, and the score might go lower. The next step, if you decide that you want to try again, maybe improve your score, you can take steps to boost your score. So as I'll explain it later in the slide deck, every single question under each section. So the impact assessment is formed of 5 pillars, and each pillar has various questions about workers, the environment, governance, etc. So all of them are graded, and there are ways of improving your score, either by picking a better option, which you'd know if you select it, you get better points, or you can speak to obviously a consultant who can take you through this process, and you can take various steps such as improve your policies or make different decisions or change something in the structure of the company. So that's a whole process which happens in the background. Then making the legal change, and again, I'm going to detail it more later, but this is about looking at the constitution and the articles of association or whatever documents are at the foundation of your company in your relevant country. So in the UK, it's articles of association, and we're registered on a website called Companies House. And there are various things that the board of directors in a company and the executive team would have to look at and would have to discuss and record in minutes and pass various resolutions. So it's quite the process as well, more at a higher level. And then once that is done, and the legal change, is to make sure that the company's main documents mention that they are accountable to, not just to customers and profit related stakeholders, but also to the community and the environment. So it's something that says we are truly committed to doing business for good, or better business for good. And then, but last but not least, this whole application is submitted for assessment and review. And then there will be the evaluation stage and the verification stage, where proof will be required for the answers in the questionnaire. So obviously we need to be honest with everything we put in there. And if all goes well, we get to sign the Declaration of Interdependence, which is basically a contract committing us to doing business for good. And then finally paying for the annual fee. And then this whole certification lasts for 3 years. And then if eligible, the company can apply for recertification. So that's it in very brief terms. And by the way, I forgot to mention, but if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and I'll be able to answer them at the end. So in terms of the timeline, we said that we did some research and then we found out about the timeline. The next big thing, the biggest thing, is tackling the B impact assessment, or the BIA. So the company that I work for, Appointed, is all about data protection, as you may have gathered, because we're all about digital services. So we're very big on organization of data and how we put things in folders, and again, levels of access. So for a new company that wants to become a B Corp, I recommend that they think about and set up their infrastructure, which is a good foundation, because if the company scales up, if the company becomes bigger, if the company decides to recertify, having that really good initial structure is good, because all you do is just do copy paste, and then all you do is change the year, or say second round of certification or something like that. But having the original processes in place is really, really helpful. And say if employees leave the company, the original employees that put all of this in place, it ensures that the future generation of, or like whoever takes it forward, knows how to replicate it. And it's really, in terms of saving time and money and resources, it's a really good thing to put in place. So first of all, assigning a leader, assigning someone who is going to take on this challenge or project, whichever way you want to look at it. So this person will be in charge of the assessment, obviously the data management and the updates. So the person that creates an account on the big platform, there's a platform where this assessment is being completed. And this person is also going to receive the various bits of information, documents, evidence. So they have to be responsible with how they manage that data, and that they would also be the main point of contact for the analysts and the evaluation and verification analysts, who are the first B Lab people that you deal with when it comes to B Corp, because for most of it, say for the first half of it, is quite a solo journey. As a company, you just go through the motions, you complete the assessment, and you do the internal changes, etc. So yes, this leader is in touch with the specialists afterwards. Then having a dedicated communication channel. So just out of curiosity, and you can put it in the chat, or since there's only a few of us, which communication medium do you use in your company for various kinds of, company information, sharing updates, sharing expertise?
For us, it's all Google. So it's Google Chat, Google Drive, Google everything. For now, we may have to switch to Microsoft because of the company we have and the software we're creating, but for now, everything's in Google.
Interesting. And how is Google Chat in terms of functionality? Are you finding it quite useful and secure for sharing important information?
Yeah, because we're a small company. Yeah, we're less than 10. So
Oh, right. Yeah.
yeah, so the core team is less than 10, and then we just work with a very large amount of suppliers and partners as a destination management company. So for us, it works, but for someone larger, I don't see the functionality being equal as something like Slack or Teams, for example.
I see.
Hmm.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yes, we use Slack, and we have so many channels. Although there's only 29 of us, we have many different dedicated ones. And we also had a separate one for B Corp, which was really useful because we could just share the information there, and we could, amend the level of access as well. And actually, when I was doing research for this, I found out that using things like Slack and Teams, I didn't know about Google Chats, to be honest. I'm just so focused on the Drive and documents part of it that I've never used a chats function, but sometimes it can be safer than email. So it's something to consider. And of course, having a dedicated folder on good old Google Drive. And this is to keep the research notes again for whoever takes on the B Corp torch, to keep different assessment versions, as I'm going to show you in a second, important documents and files, and to share things safely with B Lab analysts and verifiers later on. And I could not emphasize this enough. And maybe it is common sense, but I thought I'd just put it out there. It's super important that files are saved to a cloud and not a local computer, even if it's a work one, just because in terms of safety, it's much better. And it's making sure that also people can collaborate. I know you can collaborate on things like Word, for example, but it's just much better on something like Google Docs or Google Sheets, where people can collaborate, but also you can really restrict access much more easily, and make sure that your progress is saved. Nothing worse than losing the progress on a 200 question questionnaire. Cool. So yeah, I just created an example folder here, and something else to consider. And again, this might depend on the company, but we are very, very particular about this, especially because we are ISO 27001 certified. So we have quite some strict rules when it comes to document classification. Figuring out when it comes to the evidence that you provide for your questionnaire, what documents are confidential, internal, or public upon request. And I'm going to take you through the kind of data that is necessary for, or that might be asked from you for each of the 5 pillars, and how to see that information, just so that you know how to store it, and again, what level of access you have, and again, only share with relevant parties. So if you have a folder about, or for example, with financial information that you might need to report as part of your application, no need for the development team to be part of that folder, especially if they're not involved in the B Corp process. And only share these folders with an analyst once you have entered that stage, and if they have asked for that information. Sometimes you might have all the documents that you might think are necessary, but sometimes it might be like, we just need proof for this, this, and that. It's just good to have it there. And then again, I'll show you soon how to best share it with an external party, so that you protect the safety of your information after you've qualified or you've certified as a B Corp. So working with a B impact assessment. This can be completed online. So you create an account as as the B lead for your company, you have to fill out some information, general in terms of number of employees, locations, address, etc. Depending on your industry, you're then issued this impact assessment, which is very smart because you will not have most of the time questions that are not relevant to your field. So I'm pretty sure that if we were a manufacturing company of any kind, we would have had probably some different subsections. Whereas because we're just digital service-based, our questions were relevant to that. Something that was quite cool about this was that you could fill out the questions under each section, and it's quite interactive and easy to use. And then you can click download here, and it provides you with an Excel spreadsheet, which automatically shows you how many points you would have gotten on a question, and then how many points you got. You could add that to a Google Drive again. Don't store it locally. And in fact, there was, 1 second. I could show you here. I added it much later in the slide, but I thought it might be good to show you earlier just how I structured it. 1 second. Yes, it's here. I don't know if you can see this well. Okay. So something I did, which was incredibly useful because there are so many questions, was first of all, I color-coded the sections. So we have governance, we have workers, we have community, customer, environment, sorry, and customers. And you see here the impact topic, the summary, the question, the answers that are available. And then you can see exactly how many points you earned. I just used a blank example. And then, yeah, points available, that's a duplicate. And then what I did was I went through it again, and I selected whether it was an easy point, moderate, hard point, or not counting, or whether we got full marks. And what that did was it created such a useful tool so that when discussing this with a manager, I could say, these are the things that we could improve in the following stage. For example, things like mission, we don't count that. There are some questions that don't give you points. Just stating your mission, you don't get points whether, to say this is a bad or a good mission. But things like integrating social and environmental performance into decision-making, if that's not something you already have in place, it's a hard point and you can't focus on that. And again, using project management principles, you have to think, right, what are the things that we could improve on in the near future if we are to, make a lot of progress. And then I added a column on action needed. And you can also filter this in terms of easy points. So, yes, I will put here easy points, just as an example. And then you can see exactly just the questions that you can tackle immediately. And there are quick wins, and they might give you some extra points. That's particularly important if you are, say, very close to 80, very, very close. And you need things like an employee handbook. That's not too bad. Or maybe things about suppliers, or if you've already calculated, for example, your carbon emissions, etc. So yeah, I found it really useful to deal with it like that, rather than go through everything and be like, oh, we need to do this, and that yields many more other projects, etc. So it really simplified it for us. So yeah, let me just go back to where I stopped. So as I said, there are 5 pillars. And now we can look at the exact data that we collect for each. And just as a side note, there is also a disclosure questionnaire, which is mostly a yes or no questionnaire. And that investigates whether you have any ties to controversial industries, for example, companies that may be involved with things like pornography, fossil fuels, weapon production, tobacco, things like that. So hopefully you'll not be involved in any of those things, but it's just it's a formality, and it's important that you complete it, because sometimes you might have, for example, ties with a distillery or something like that, and it's not inherently controversial, but you do have to report it. So this is also the kind of data that you'd have to look at and be like, right, we need to check our records, we need to see exactly who our clients are. It might be easier if you deal with bigger clients, but if you have, for example, a subscription service like we have an enterprise solution and a subscription-based solution, then you really have to go and look into a lot of detail and see who's signing up for your service, and to have a mechanism in place. And as mentioned before, subsections in each, points awarded for each question, and you need minimum 80 points. So the first section is governance. And I looked at, just to give you a disclaimer, this is not exhaustive. There are many more other sections, but I thought it would be good to put the main ones. So in the section governance, you'll be asked things about your mission and engagement. So your company mission, vision, and values, how you integrate those values into your decision-making, and whether these values relate to social and environmental issues. And that's for them to identify whether you already do business for good in some form of way. And if you don't, obviously, it doesn't mean that you don't do good business, but it just shows whether you are involved in these kinds of sectors. Then ethics and transparency, whether you have a code of ethics in your company, whether your finances are audited and how that is done, and how transparently you display your company information as well. And then you have governance metrics, and that's also highly confidential. So yearly revenue, usually based on the previous fiscal year, but it depends on the time of year when you apply. And then you have mission locked, and that depends on the business. So if your company's social or environmental performance has been integrated into decision-making, regardless of who owns the company, then you get more sections. So it's a bit of a matryoshka situation. If sometimes when you answer a question in a certain way, you get a whole new set of questions. So it varies largely from business to business, from industry to industry. So as you can see, the teams that you might engage with to answer these questions are the executive team, the C-suite, and the finance team. Some information is publicly available, for example, on the website, if you have your values on the website and stuff like that. Other information is internal, other is highly confidential, etc. So it's very important to share this safely with whoever is the B lead, or between teams, just to make sure that it has the right classification. For example, the yearly revenue, is highly confidential, and the values are public, and my company. Sorry, I think you raised your hand.
I did. Forgive me. I was like, I don't know if I should do chat or just ask, since we're so small group. Just a quick question. A lot of these to me seem quite relative. And so I'm curious how you navigate that, because just that there's no hard yes or no for some of these. It's kind of how you interpret the question. So how did you personally navigate some of that?
So many of these questions, so I just put the themes, so I understand it might look quite vague. In terms of values, for example, you might just put your mission there, and it's a matter of being yes or like, does your mission incorporate something related to the environment, yes or no? Do your values tackle, I don't know, like, or touch on some form of, or address some form of social issue, yes or no? So some of these are quite simple. You just look at what your company does and be like, do we do this? Yes or no? Do we have a code of ethics? Do we get an external auditor for our finances? Do we have something on our website which is a transparent overview of our carbon emissions? So it's very much yes or no for most of these.
Okay.
Yeah. So and for many questions, they give you a multiple choice. Sorry, I should have mentioned this in the structure of the BIA. But for some, it's very nuanced. So when we'll get to other sections, for example, workers, there's one on parental leave for secondary caregivers. So it's asking like, oh, how much secondary parental leave do you offer in your company? And that's under health and well-being, and the options might be
A
three
lot.
fully paid, 3 months fully paid, or 3 months unpaid, or over 3 months paid, or things like that. And then you tick whatever represents you the best. And sometimes you might be able to say other, and they give you a box in which to give more information. So yeah, these are just kind of themes, but I'll actually this is a good point. I'll bring in more examples to illustrate these topics. So thank you so much.
Yeah, please continue.
Ioana,
Sorry.
one thing that I want to bring to your governance, because I think governance, it's one of the most important themes, and it's no coincidence that you started with this. Besides what you said, in the governance, one important aspect is in the questions that I often have with my customers that refer to the board of directors or members of the board, how it's called, governance board, and how these people are connected with the social and environmental KPIs, for example. So one question is saying like this, okay, is the leadership of the company from the top to the middle management involved in decisions that consider social and environmental aspects of the company? To the board of director maybe have these KPIs and they are paid accordingly? So and also, how is the code of ethics of the company? Many companies, for example, have practices that they use, but maybe they don't have a code of ethics written, or something published on the website or a policy. So it's very, very intense, and I think that from the very beginning here in the governance side, you see how this mission and the vision of the company that is given and written somewhere is connected to the environmental and social performance. And another thing that I find very interesting, and you explained, it's a mission log. And the mission log is connected very much with what you said in the very beginning with the legal requirements. Your company, because it's based in the UK and in Scotland, has complied and has fulfilled this mission log, meaning that you could adapt the constitution papers of your company, and you included the interest of all stakeholders and the mission to do good. But other countries in Europe, for example, don't have this. So maybe it's good to say that the legal requirements depend from country to country. For example, I'm from Romania. We don't have this law. Germany has other laws, and I think that also other countries. Austria has no laws, and I was living for 15 years in Austria. They don't have a law about this. So you cannot score the full points here at mission law question. You just score much less because you cannot fulfill this legal requirement. It's something that companies cannot do anything about. So I find this governance side really, really interesting, and it's bringing the entire power of the company that sits in the mission and the vision from the very beginning. Yeah, that's all.
Definitely, yeah, which is why this process can be difficult. And I would argue the legal requirement is also it's one of the biggest hurdles in the whole process. So for B Corp, you do need, when I said all hands on deck, it really is all hands on deck. And it requires a lot of, going down deep into the foundations of the company. Just aware of the time, so I'll try and whiz through the rest as well. So the second section is workers. So things like number of workers, the wages that are paid. Do you pay a decent living wage, the health benefits, but also the local government provisions of healthcare, the possibilities for career development, as well as things like the employee handbook, retention and attrition rates, etc. So the engagement and satisfaction. So here we engage more the HR team as well as finance. And again, super careful when transferring HR files because they're highly confidential and we don't want them to end up in the wrong hands. So this will probably be the narrowest transfer of information between the B Corp lead and HR. And just as a side tip, it's a good process, good practice to also take this opportunity when doing the B Corp assessment to review HR policies and initiatives and to see whether there are any updates needed, because that could actually boost the score later. There might be simple things, for example, you already have a good practice in the office, or you're missing a governance policy, for example, anti-corruption, or which should already exist, but some other policies which might not be, they might be governance policies, they might be HR policies, or for example, the statutory rates might have to be updated for maternity leave. This is what we have in the UK. So it's a good opportunity to brush over some documentation in the company whilst you're doing it, and to maybe put aside the documents that you might think would be asked or would be required by the evaluation analyst when you enter that stage.
Maybe one tip that I have to share from working with my customers in the worker side is that they are requested to provide lists with all employees. For example, what's the salary, what's the hourly salary, what's the bonuses they receive in a certain year. I found really useful that you don't give the names of the employees, so you just create the list with maybe numbers instead of names, and try to get rid of anything that could be, I mean, you have to be mindful to the GDPR, so anything that is personal information is tried to take out. So that's a good tip in order to a little bit manage this conflict between highly confidential information, but still something that you need to provide to B Lab to prove your impact. So this works for my clients so far.
And I think something that would also help, because there are some questions asking how many female managers you have, to look whether there is a gender pay gap, to look at whether there is inequality in your company. Probably making this spreadsheet with just the role and the salary is good. Maybe mentioning female or male, I'm not sure. We didn't have to do that at all. We just had to say to mention a number of how many female managers we have.
Yeah.
But that's a really good shout. Anonymizing wherever you can is always best. Then we have community. So this is looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion. Again, the gender pay gap. Very important for companies having multiple branches. Geographic structure and scope, as well as ownership. Then civic engagement and giving, whether you do anything regarding the community, charities, I don't know, company runs, etc. This would all give you brownie points, so to speak, for the assessment. And very, very importantly, the supply chain management, which I think is really important, especially for companies in, say, the manufacturing industry, or which have more complex supply chains than, for example, SaaS companies or digital companies. And, looking at the outsourced staffing and services and how these are monitored as well. So you really go quite deeply into detail. And yeah, if you have different branches in your company, then it's really important to have folders for each, or to organize your information accordingly. And again, to check the level of access when it comes to information about suppliers, and reach out for more information if needed, because they're required to give you more information about what they do as well, from an environmental standpoint as well. I can't remember if we had to provide a lot of information with that. I know that we had to say that we pay the real living wage in the UK, which is different from the government set minimum wage. And we had to say that the suppliers that we work with, that contractors we work with, also pay their employees the living wage. So it's something to also bear in mind when it comes to the supply chain, because at some point in the application, you might be asked about that. And yes, the teams engaged here would be human resources and operations. Environment. So this is also a really big one. Looking at the facility management and the office that you work in, if you're an office-based company, or a virtual office if you work hybrid or you work from home. Looking at your energy use, whether your company uses any renewable energy and what your greenhouse gas emissions are, and that goes into detail with scope 1, 2, and 3, so direct and indirect emissions. As well as your water use and conservation practices. And finally, whether you have a recycling program in place and what chemical reduction methods are used. So do you use any, even for cleaning, we heard whether we used any products, any cleaning products that would affect, that would be toxic, that would affect flora and fauna. They have that's a symbol on the bottle showing that, if that's the case. And we had to collaborate with the cleaning company that we work with, and we had to replace the products that we used so they were more eco-friendly. So this is definitely something that might require looking into in terms of calculating your emissions. And for that, you might need to speak to a consultant so that you can get your emissions professionally calculated, so to speak, professionally measured, because it's quite a process. There are also free carbon calculators if you just want a basic breakdown of your scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. And that's particularly useful if you have a small company and you might not have huge emissions, and you might just have scope 3 emissions mostly, and it would be a matter of breaking down employee commuting and other small things, mostly services that you purchase for a company. That's a whole other discussion. And of course, it's important to check local/EU laws depending on where you're based. If you work for a company that has 200 plus employees, or 250, Corina, feel free to correct me, you have to report your emissions every year by law. And if you're smaller, it's voluntary, but at the moment, it's still good practice. And of course, it might be just common sense, but storing your records of energy and water usage and maybe putting it in a spreadsheet makes it really easy to add up the kilowatts or whatever, and report it in the B Corp assessment. And very, very important, I think, for manufacturers to investigate your supply chain. And if you offer services, to investigate your suppliers and the contractors that you work with, to make sure that they are also okay, and that you don't accidentally work with a supplier that might actually be bad for the environment. So the team engaged in this would be the operations team. And I'm assuming for bigger companies, I don't know, because ours is quite small, having a dedicated sustainability or environmental team to look at that.
I think that is important in environment. Just 1 second before you go with it, to be very careful. 2 things. It's very difficult to demonstrate your renewable energy use in the total consumption of your energy if you do not have your own sources of renewable energy. And this is, for example, a challenge that I have with some of my clients, because they are connected to the national grid, which brings energy from burning gas, from burning coal, also from renewable energy. But then you have to be careful what type of renewable energy it is, because solar, wind is considered low impact, but let's say hydro, which implies a process to transform water into energy through pipelines, is considered high impact. So you have to differentiate a little bit. What I also think it's a challenge, and therefore companies look into that, is the how do you manage your suppliers chain and the environmental impact in this supply chain. Yeah, because sometimes companies really look only at what they do. They did not check, okay, what's happening upstream and downstream of my product or service. So there are a lot of questions here also that regard suppliers that companies are now challenged with. For example, how do you involve in making your suppliers have less waste? Or how do you can help your suppliers recycle? Or do you have any policies that you can help them through programs or through actions, or maybe some activist work to be better, to be more ecological if they cannot be sustainable? So there's a lot of things that companies now look into, asking information. As you well said, this is required also for reporting. So big companies need to report this every year through their ESG reporting. So now is the time to start asking, because from the next year, when this reporting is mandatory for a lot of companies, that could be an exercise that you need to repeat with your suppliers. It's a lot of questions in the environmental side. I really love them because they go into deep roots of your impact, and it demonstrates that as a company you can't think only of what you do inside, but you need to look at the influences of your environmental impact. So yeah, this is what I wanted to add, because this is really a very, very crucial impact area of being back.
Oh, I think you're muted, Corina. Just at the very end, you got muted.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. No, but that's all. Thank you very much. I just wanted to say it's crucial to do a good impact assessment. You can't avoid the environmental part, and you need to really look in all the places where you have some impact or you lack impact also, and you need to think how you should do it in the future. Yeah,
That's really true.
Sorry, I have a hard stop because I have a meeting in 5 minutes, but I wondered, will we have access to both the slide deck and the video, the recording?
Of course, yes. Yeah, I'll send them to Corina, and she can pass them on.
Yes.
And you have my email address as well at the end.
That would
If
be
you
amazing.
get in touch, I'd love that. I'd love to keep the conversation going.
Me too. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry because this is really interesting. I so appreciate both of your time. So thank you. And I'm so sorry I have to leave, but I will definitely be in contact.
No
Thank you,
worries.
Gabriela.
You're very welcome. Thanks, Kirsty.
Okay.
Take care.
Thank you, Gabriela. We'll see you in November.
Okay, cheers.
Ciao, ciao.
Yeah, and on this note, I would like to say that yes, I think we were quite privileged at Appointed, because we had the opportunity. The office that we're in has 100% renewable energy, so for us it was quite streamlined. But I completely understand that in other places, outside of the UK or in the UK, there might be other companies that might not have that. So Corina, definitely that's a question that could be a challenge in many situations. And finally, customers. So that's the last pillar, and it poses the question of whether your product or service addresses a social or environmental problem. So and also the question of whether you manage the impact and value created for your customers and or their beneficiaries. And I think a really important part of this section is making sure that you have a privacy policy in place outlining how you handle and protect your customers' data, because it comes under customer stewardship. And normally you'd have this on the website, but also you'd have to keep in mind whether you do ethical marketing, advertisement, or customer engagement. And yeah, the team engaged in this will be the customer operations team. So I've showed you already like how you could organize your assessment in terms of easy points, moderate points, and hard points. And you'll have the link here. So I'll make an externally available copy to this so you can access it in your own time. And finally, there's a disclosure questionnaire. And the evidence for this doesn't have to be provided at the time of completing the B impact assessment. It's much later, and it's normally quite targeted. So the B Lab company, the B Lab, I think, an evaluation analyst. I can't remember if it was at the evaluation or at the verification stage, but they do require you to list all the potentially controversial industries or like companies within the controversial industries that you work with. So you get the opportunity to give additional proof at that time, but hopefully it doesn't have to be the case. And the legal requirement, which Corina mentioned earlier as well, is, yes, a commitment to consider the impact of a company's decisions on all of their stakeholders. And as you said, Corina, is different in every country. It's particularly important that the documents that are shared or transferred to demonstrate this legal requirement are sent safely. And an additional tip for this would be sending things with password protection, and sending the password as just a blank separate email. And that's when you have to send documents to an analyst, just to make sure that it doesn't go in there, it doesn't get transferred in a way that breaches GDPR laws. And finally, for evaluation and verification, as I said, you've submitted your assessment. You might be asked, hey, like we've flagged these questions for you to provide evidence for. This is what you could submit. So you can store everything. If you manage to put away all the documents that you thought were relevant as you went along the assessment, you can very easily share them from your drive. And as an example here, Corina, I hope you forgive me, I've used your email address, but you can share with an expiration date. So if you know that the whole process will be done by a certain time in the future, you can set that and the person can have access, but then not forever. So making sure that your data stays safe in the process. So overall, what would give a company really good foundations for certification is having a scalable infrastructure. So as I said, a good way to organize folders on a cloud-based software, so Google Drive or Microsoft or anything else that stores things safely. Sharing or transferring information responsibly through encryption of emails or safe channels. Making sure there is good communication across the relevant teams and documenting things where relevant, especially challenges, so that they can be handled even better in the recertification process if relevant. When dealing with client data, as Corina mentioned, abiding by the EU, GDPR, and or local laws, keeping good records across the business, just as a default kind of function. In HR, finance, audit, operations, because then it'll be much easier to pull all the necessary documents. And if something's lacking, then it's the B impact assessment is a good opportunity to start making some changes, filling the gaps. And of course, speaking to a consultant like Corina or another B lead, if you want to step up any part of your business that might need improvement. For example, working on the environmental stuff. So in our case, it did kickstart lots of positive changes in the environmental side of things. We worked with a consultancy firm, and we devised a carbon reduction plan, and we measured our emissions and we set our targets. We signed a climate pledge as well, so that by 2040 we become net zero. And that was all powered by our B Corp application and assessment, because we realized that we had to do more. And now one of our foundation is sustainability, and the other one is care. So at our core, we want to do the best that we can. Even if we don't create direct emissions, we want to make sure that no matter what we do upstream and downstream, we don't contribute to the climate crisis and to other social problems. And yes, and employee initiatives is another area where it's relatively easy to see where you could make some improvements depending on the company's resources, etc. So that was me. I think in terms of timing, we're just 3 minutes over. I saw that there is a question in the chat, so I'll just double check now. What tool do you use to calculate greenhouse gas emissions? Very good question. I cannot remember off the top of my head, but there was a free calculator that we found online. It was research-based, and it gave us let me actually find it. Stop sharing. 1 second.
Yeah, I shared with Gabriela here because she's coming from the travel and tourism world. One tool which is for travel, tourism, hospitality. It's called Carmichael, but it's specific for travel and tourism.
Yes, we have the normative business calculator, and yeah, we just had to put in our yearly revenue. We had to select whether we wanted it for the current fiscal year or past fiscal, the calendar year or the fiscal year, and then we had to put a bunch of details in terms of it was quite detailed actually, now thinking about it. Everything that we bought, services, products, even things for the office, paper, cardboard, everything, how much we use in terms of water. And yeah, it was quite a good tool. And then afterwards, we worked with a consultancy firm to do the proper in-depth analysis of what we used up. And it was actually quite similar. So yes, I'll find the link and probably attach it to the deck as well. Was the management of the company involved from the very first step or later? So, of course, there are discussions at the beginning to, again, analyze whether it was something viable for us at the time. So that's when it was quite necessary. And on the part of governance, it was also quite, they were involved in terms of documentation and the board discussing the legal requirement, etc. So they were involved. When it comes to the nitty-gritty of the other questions, though, it was mostly the delegated people in operations and things like that, just because it was much quicker. So I think we worked on the principle of least impact to other teams, particularly the executive team, especially because we're also small to medium company. So yes, wherever I could or wherever we could in terms of the operations team, we tried to manage the assessment by ourselves because we had access already. But for things like governance, of course, the management team were more involved. And of course, there were regular updates. And when it came to the discussions with the verification and evaluation analysts, the management was present and was part of it, part and parcel of the process.
Ioana, I think that I can close this webinar with feeling very happy, and I wish that many more people like us, Kirsty, me, and others who are working on their BIAs now or in the future would listen to you. So if it's okay, I will make use of this slide deck that you will send, and maybe the recording, and I will also let others hear what you had to say, because it was for me really a masterclass. Thank you for today. Thank you for everything you shared today.
No problem. Thank you so much for your invitation, and I really hope it helps you guys with your projects.